Chapter 8. Mina Murray's Journal. Same day, 11 o'clock p.m. Oh, but I am tired. If it were not that I had made my diary a duty, I should not even open it tonight. We had a lovely walk. Lucy, after a while, was in gay spirits, owing, I think, to some dear cows who came nosing towards us in a field close to the lighthouse, and frightened the wits out of us. I believe we had forgotten everything, except, of course, personal fear, and it seemed to wipe the slate clean and give us a fresh start. We had a capital severe tea at Robin Hood's Bay in a sweet little old-fashioned inn with a bow window right over the seaweed-covered rocks of the Strand. I believe we should have shocked the new woman with our appetites. Men are more tolerant, bless them. Then we walked home for some, or rather many stoppages to rest, and with our hearts full of a constant dread of wild bulls. Lucy was really tired, and we intended to creep off to bed as soon as we could. The young curate came in, however, and Mrs. Westenra asked to stay for a supper. Lucy and I had a fight for it in the Dusty Miller. I know it was a hard fight on my part, and I was quite heroic. I think that some day the bishops might get together and see about breeding up a new class of curates, whom do not take supper, no matter how much they may be pressed to, and who may know when girls are tired. Lucy is asleep and breathing softly. She has more color in her cheeks than usual, and looks oh so sweet. If Mr. Holmwood fell in love with her seeing only her in the drawing-room, I wonder what he would say if he saw her now. Some of the new women writers will some day start an idea that men and women should be allowed to see each other sleep before proposing or accepting, but I suppose the new woman won't condescend in future to accept. She would do the proposing herself, and a nice job she will make of it too. There is some consolation in that. I am so happy tonight, because dear Lucy seems better. I really believe she's turned the corner, and we are now over her troubles with dreaming. I should be quite happy if I only knew of Jonathan. God bless and keep him. 11th August, 3 a.m. Diary again. No sleep now, so I may as well write. I'm too agitated to sleep. We have had such an adventure, such an agonizing experience. I fell asleep as soon as I had closed my diary. Suddenly I became broad awake and sat up with a horrible sense of fear upon me, and of some feeling of emptiness around me. The room was dark, so I couldn't see Lucy's bed. I stole across and felt for her. The bed was empty. I lit a match and found that she was not even in the room. The door was shut but not locked, as I had left it. I feared to wake her mother, who had been more than usually ill lately, so threw on some clothes and ready to look for her. As I was leaving the room, it struck me that the clothes that she wore might give me some clue to her dreaming intention. Dressing gowns would mean house. Dress, outside. Dressing gown and dress were both in the same place. Thank God, I said to myself, she cannot be far, for she is only in her nightdress. I ran downstairs and looked into the sitting room. Not there. Then I looked into the other rooms in the house with an ever-growing fear chilling my heart. Finally, I came to the hall doorway and found it open. It was not wide open, but the catch of the lock had not been caught. The people of the house are careful to lock the doors at night, so I feared that Lucy might have gone out as she was. There was no time to think about what might happen. A vague, overmastering fear obscured all details. I took a big, heavy shawl and ran out. The clock was striking 1 as I was entering into the crescent, and there was not a soul in sight. I ran along the north terrace, but could not see no sign of the white figure which I expected. On the edge of the west cliff above the pier, I looked across the harbor of the east cliff, in hopes or in fear, I do not know which, of seeing Lucy in our favorite seat. There was a bright full moon, with heavy black clouds driving away, which threw the whole scene into a fleeting diorama of light and shade as they sailed across. For a moment or two, I could see nothing, as the shadow of the cloud obscured St. Mary's Church and all around it. Then, as the clouds passed, I could see the ruins of the abbey coming into view, and at the edge of a narrow band of light, as sharp as a sword, cut along with it, The church and the churchyard gradually became visible. Whatever my expectation was, it was not disappointed, for there, on our favorite seat, the silver light of the moon struck a half-reclining figure, snowy white. Coming from the cloud was too quickly for me to see, for shadow had shut down on the light almost immediately, but it seemed to me as though something dark stood behind the seat where the white figure shone, and was bent over it. What it was, whether man or beast, I could not tell. I did not wait to catch another glimpse of it, but flew down the steep steps to the pier and along by the fish market to the bridge, which was the only way to reach the east cliff. The town seemed as dead, for not a soul did I see. I rejoiced in that, for it was so, for I did not want no witness to poor Lucy's condition. The time and distance seemed endless, and my knees trembled, and my breath labored as I toiled up the endless steps of the Abbey. I must have gone fast, and yet it seemed to me as if my feet were weighed down with lead, and though every joint in my body was rusty. When I almost got to the top, I could see the seat and the white figure, for I was now close enough to distinguish it even through the spell of shadows. There was undoubtedly something long and black bending over the half-reclined white figure. I called out in fright, "Lucy! Lucy!" And something raised a head, and from where I could see, a white face and red gleaming eyes. Lucy did not answer, and I ran at the entrance of the churchyard. As I entered, the church was between me and the seat, and for a minute or two, I lost sight of her. When I came into view again, the cloud had passed, and the moonlight struck so brilliantly that I could see Lucy half reclined, with her head lying on the back of the seat. She was quite alone, and there was no sign of any living thing about. When I bent over her, I could see that she was still asleep. Her lips were parted, and she was breathing, not softly as usual with her, but long, heavy gasps, as though striving to get her lungs full with each breath. As I came close, she put up her hand in her sleep and pulled the collar of her nightdress close around her throat. Whilst she did so, there came a little shudder through her, as though she felt cold. I flung the warm shawl over her, and drew the edges tight around her neck, for I dread lest she would get some deadly chill from the night air, unclad as she was. I feared to wake her at all at once, so in order to have my hands free that I might help her, I fastened the shawl at her throat with a big safety pin. But I must have been clumsy in the anxiety, and pinched and pricked her with it, for by and by, when her breathing became quieter, she put her hand to her throat and moaned. When I had carefully wrapped it up, I put my shoes on her feet, and then began to gently wake her. At first she did not respond, but gradually she became more and more uneasy in her sleep, moaning and sighing occasionally. At last, as time was passing fast, and for many other reasons I wished to get her home at once, I shook her more forcefully, till finally she opened her eyes and awoke. She did not seem surprised to see me, as of course she did not realize at all at once where she was. Lucy always wakes prettily, and even at such a time, when her body must have been chilled with cold and her mind somewhat applied at waking unclad in the churchyard of the night, she did not lose her grace. She trembled a little and clung to me. When I told her to come at once with me home, she rose without a word, with the obedience of a child. As we passed along, the gravel hurt my feet, and Lucy noticed me wince. She stopped and wanted to insist the taking of my shoes, but I would not. However, when we got to the pathway outside the church, where there was a puddle of water remaining from the storm, I dabbed my feet in the mud, using each foot in turn with the other, so that as we went home, no one, in case we should meet one, should notice my bare feet. Fortune favored us, and we got home without meeting a single soul. Once we saw a man, who seemed not quite sober, passing along the street in front of us, but we hid in a door till he disappeared up an opening such as there was here. Stepped closely, with steps little closes, or wins as they call them in Scotland. My heart beat so loud all the time that sometimes I thought I should faint. I was filled with anxiety about Lucy, not only for her health, lest she should suffer from the exposure, but for her reputation in case the story got wind. When we got in, and had washed our feet, and had said a prayer of thankfulness together, I tucked her into bed. Before falling asleep, she asked, even implored me not to say a word to anyone, even her mother, about her sleepwalking adventure. I hesitated at first to promise, but on thinking of the state of her mother's health, and how the knowledge of such a thing would fret her, and thinking too of how such a story might be distorted, nay, infallibly would be, in case should it leak out, I thought it wiser to do so. I hope I did right. I have locked the door, and the key is now tied to my wrist, so perhaps I shall not be disturbed. Lucy is sleeping soundly. The reflex of the dawn is high and far over the sea. Same day, noon. All goes well. Lucy slept until I woke her, and has seemed to not have ever changed her side. The adventure of the night does not seem to have harmed her. On the contrary, it has benefited her, for she looks better in this morning than she has done in weeks. I was sorry to notice, for my clumsiness of the safety pin had hurt her. Indeed, it might have been serious, for the skin of her throat was pierced. It must have been pierced by the skin of must have been pierced up in a patch of loose skin and have transfixed it, for there were 2 little red points like pinpricks, and on the band of her nightdress was a drop of blood. When I apologized and was concerned about it, she laughed and petted me and said she didn't even feel it. Fortunately, it cannot leave a scar, as it is so tiny. Same day, night. We passed a happy day. The air was clear and the sun bright, and there was a cool breeze. We took our lunch in Mulgrave Woods, Mrs. Westenra driving by the road, and Lucy and I walked by the cliff path and joined her at the gate. I felt a little sad myself, for I could not but feel absolutely happy it would have been had Jonathan been with me. But there, I must be only patient. In the evening we strolled to the casino terrace, and with some good music by Spohr and Mackenzie, and went to bed early. Lucy seems more restful than she has ever been for some time, and fell asleep at once. I shall lock the door and secure the key all the same before, though I do not expect any trouble tonight. 12th August. My expectations were wrong, for twice during the night I was wakened by Lucy trying to get out. She seemed, even in her sleep, to be a little impatient at finding the door shut, and then went back to bed under a sort of protest. I woke with the dawn and heard the birds chirping outside the window. Lucy woke too, and I was glad to see that she was even better than on the previous morning. All of her gaiety of manner seemed to have come back, and she came and snuggled in beside me and told me all about Arthur. I told her anxiously I was about Jonathan, and then she tried to comfort me. Well, she succeeded somewhat, though through sympathy can't alter the facts. It can't help but to make them more bearable. 13th August. Another quiet day, and to the bed with the key on my wrist as before. Again I woke in the night and found Lucy sitting up on the bed, still asleep, pointing to the window. I got up quietly and pulled aside the blind, looking out. It was brilliant moonlight, and the soft effect of the light over the sea and the sky, merged together in one great silent mystery, was beautiful beyond words. Between me and the moonlight fitted a great bat, coming and going in great whirling circles. Once or twice it came quite close, but was, I suppose, frightened to see me, and fluttered away across the harbor towards the abbey. When I came back from the window, Lucy had laid down again, was sleeping peacefully. She did not stir again all night. 14th August. On the east cliff, reading and writing all day, Lucy seemed to have become so much more in love with the spot than I am, and it is hard to get her away from it when it's time to come home for a lunch or tea or dinner. This afternoon, she made a funny remark. We were coming home for dinner, and we had come to the top of the steps of the West Pier and stopped to look at the view, as we generally do. The setting sun, low in the sky, was just dropping behind Kettleness. The red light was thrown all over the eastern cliff and the old abbey, and seemed to bathe everything in a beautiful rosy glow. We were silent for a while, and suddenly Lucy murmured as if to herself, "His eyes again, red eyes again. They're just the same." It was such an odd expression, coming apropos of nothing, though that quite startled me. I slew around a little, so as to see Lucy well without seeming to stare at her, and see that she was in a half-dreamy state, with an odd look on her face that I couldn't quite make out. So I said nothing, but followed her eyes. She appeared to be looking over at our own seat, whereupon a dark figure seated alone. I was a little startled myself, for it seemed for an instant as if the stranger had great eyes like burning flame. But the second look dissipated the illusion. The red sunlight was shining on the windows of St. Mary's Church behind our seat, and as the sun dipped, there was just enough sufficient change in the refraction and reflection as to make it appear as if the light moved. I called Lucy's attention to that peculiar effect, and she became herself with a start, but she looked sad all the same. It may have been that she was thinking of that terrible night up there. We never referred to it, so I said nothing, and we went home to dinner. Lucy had a headache and went to bed early. I saw her asleep and went out for a little stroll myself. I walked along the cliffs to the westward and was full of sweet sadness, for I was thinking of Jonathan. When coming home, it was then bright moonlight, so bright that the front of our part of the crescent was in shadow. Everything could be seen. I threw up a glance at our window and saw Lucy's head leaning out. I thought perhaps she was looking out for me, so I opened my handkerchief and waved it. She did not notice or make any movement whatsoever. Just then, the moonlight crept around an angle of the building, and the light fell on the window. There, distinctly, was Lucy, with her head lying against the side of the window-sill, and her eyes shut. She was fast asleep, and beside her, seated on the window-sill, was something that looked like a good-sized bird. I was afraid she would get a chill, so I ran upstairs, but as I came into the room, she was moving back to her bed, fast asleep and breathing heavily. She was holding her hand to her throat, as if to protect it from cold. I did not wake her, but tucked her in warmly. I had taken care that the door was locked and the window securely fastened. She looks so sweet as she sleeps, but she is paler than her wont, and there was a drawn, haggard look under her eyes, which I do not like. I fear she is fretting about something. I wish I could find out what it is. 15th August. Rose later than usual. Lucy was languid and tired, and she slept on even after we had been called. We had a happy sunrise at breakfast. Arthur's father is better and wants the marriage to become off soon. Lucy is filled with quiet joy, and her mother is quite glad and sorry at once. Later on in the day she told me the cause. She grieved to lose Lucy as her very own, but she rejoiced that she is soon to have someone to protect her. Poor dear sweet lady. She confided to me that she had gotten her death warrant. She has not told Lucy and made me promise secrecy. Her doctor told me that within a few months at most she must die, for her heart is weakening. At any time, even now, a sudden shock would be almost sure to kill her. Ah, but we were wise to keep it from her, the affair of the dreadful night of Lucy's sleepwalking. 17th August. No diary for 2 days. I had not had the heart to write. Some sort of shadowy pall seems to be coming over our happiness. No news from Jonathan, and Lucy seems to be growing weaker, whilst her mother's hours are numbering to a close. I do not understand Lucy's fading away as she is doing. She eats well and sleeps well and enjoys the fresh air, but all the time the roses in her cheek are fading, and she gets weaker and more languid day by day. At night I hear her gasping as if for air. I keep the key to our door always fastened by my wrist at night, but she gets up and walks around the room and sits at the open window. Last night I found her leaning out when I woke, and when I tried to wake her I could not. She was in a faint. When I managed to restore her, she was as weak as water and cried silently before long painful struggles for breath. When I asked her how she came to be at the window, she shook her head and turned away. I trust her feeling ill may not have come from that unlucky prick of the safety pin. I looked at her throat just as I lay asleep, and the tiny wounds seemed to not have healed. They are still open, and if anything, larger than before, and the edges of them are faintly white. They are like little white dots with red centers. Unless they heal within a day or two, I shall insist on the doctor seeing about them. Letter Samuel Billington and Sons Solicitors, Whitby, Carter Pearson and Company, London, 17th August. Dear Sirs, herewith please receive invoice of goods sent by Great Northern Railway. Same are to be delivered at Carfax near Purefleet, immediately upon receipt of goods, station King's Cross. The house is presently empty, but enclosed please find keys, all of which labeled. You will please deposit the boxes, 50 in number, which form the consignment, in partially ruining building forming part of the house and marked A on rough diagram enclosed. Your agent will easily recognize the locality, as it is the ancient chapel of the mansion. The goods will leave by train 9:30 tonight, and will be due at King's Cross at 4:30 tomorrow afternoon. As our client wishes to deliver as soon as possible, we shall oblige by you having teams ready at King's Cross at the time named and forthwith conveying the goods to destination. In order to alleviate any possible delays possible through the route requirements as to have the payment upon the departure, we've enclosed chew of Herewharf £10 of receipt on which please acknowledge. Should the change be less than this, you can return balance. If greater, we shall at once send check for difference on hearing from you. You are to leave keys on coming way of the main hall of the house, where the proprietor may get them upon his entering the house by means of his duplicate key. Pray do not make us use in exceedingly the bonds of business courtesy in pressing you in all ways to use the utmost expedition. We are, dear sirs, faithfully yours, Samuel L. Billington and Son. Letters, Mincer, Carter, Preston and Patterson and Company, London, to Messrs. Billings and Son, Whitby, 21 August. Dear sirs, we beg to acknowledge £10 received and returned check of £1 7 shillings 9d amount in overdue surplus, as shown in receipt, account Herewharf. Goods are delivered in exact accordance with instructions, and keys left in placement in main hall as directed. We are, dear sirs, respectfully yours, Pro Carter, Patterson and Company. Mina Murray's Journal, 18th August. I am happy today, and writing on the seat of the churchyard. Lucy is ever so much better. Last night she slept well all night, and did not disturb me even once. The roses seemed to be coming back to her cheeks, though she's still sadly pale and wan-looking. If she were in any way anemic, I could understand it, but she is not. She is in gay spirits and full of life and cheerfulness. All the morbid reluctance seems to have passed from her, and she has just reminded me, as if I needed to remind of anything, of that night, and that it was here, on this very seat, I found her asleep. As she told me, she tapped playfully with the heel of her boot on the storm slab and said, "My poor dear feet didn't make so much noise then. I dare say poor old Mr. Sauls would have told me that it was because I didn't wake up Georgie." As she was in a communicative humor, I asked her if she had dreamed at all that night. Before she answered, that sweet puckered look came onto her forehead, which Arthur, I call him Arthur from her habit, says he loves, and indeed I don't wonder why he does, for she went in a half-dreaming way, as if trying to recall it herself. I didn't quite dream, but it all seemed to be real. I only wanted to be here in this spot. I don't know why, for I was afraid of something. I don't know what. I remember, though I suppose I was asleep, passing through the streets and over the bridge. A fish leapt as I went by, and I leaned over to look at it, and I heard lots of dogs howling. The whole town it must have been full of dogs, all howling at once. As I went up the steps, then I had a vague memory of something long and dark with red eyes, just as we saw in the sunset, and something very sweet and bitter all around me at once. And then I seemed sinking into the deep green water, and there was a singing in my ears, as I had heard that there is to drowning men, and then everything seemed to pass away from me. My soul seemed to go out from my body and float about the air. I seem to remember that once the West Lighthouse was right under me, and then there was a sort of agonizing feeling, as if I were in an earthquake. I then came back and found you shaking my body. I saw you do it before I even felt you. Then she began to laugh. It seemed a little uncanny to me, and I listened to her breathlessly. I didn't quite like it, and thought better not to keep her mind on the subject, so we drifted on to other subjects, and Lucy was like her old self again. When we got home, the fresh breeze braced her up, and her pale cheeks were really more rosy. Her mother rejoiced when she saw her, and we all spent a very happy evening together. 19th August. Oh, joy, joy, joy! Although not all joy. At last! News from Jonathan. The dear fellow has been ill, that's why he did not write. I am not afraid to think it or say it, now that I know. Mr. Hawkins sent me the letter, and wrote himself so kindly that I am to leave in the morning and go over to Jonathan, and help nurse him, if necessary, and bring him home. Mr. Hawkins says it would be a bad thing if we were to be married out there. I cried over the good sister's letter till I felt it wet against my bosom, where it lies. It is of Jonathan, and must be next to my heart, for he is in my heart. My journey is all mapped out and my luggage ready. I am only taking one change of dress. Lucy will bring my trunk to London and keep it until I send for it, for it may be that I must write no more. I must keep it to say to Jonathan, my husband. The letter that he has seen and touched must comfort me until we meet. Letter. Sister Agatha, Hospital of St. John and St. Mary, Budapest, to Miss Wilhelmina Murray, 12th August. Dear Madam, I write by desire of Mr. Jonathan Harker, who is himself not strong enough to write, though progressing well, thanks to God and St. Joseph and St. Mary. He has been under our care for nearly 6 weeks, suffering from a violent brain fever. He wishes me to convey his love, and to say that by this post I write to him, to Mr. Peter Hawkins, Exeter, to say with his dutiful respects that he is sorry for his delay, and that all of his work is completed. He will require a few weeks in rest in our sanatorium in the hills, but will return then. He wishes for me to say that he has not sufficient enough money with him, and that he would like to pay for his stay here, so that the others who need shall not be wanting for help. Believe me, yours with sympathy and blessings, Sister Agatha. P.S. My patient being asleep, I open this and let you know something more. He has told me about you, and that you are shortly to be his wife. All blessings to be to both of you. He has had some fearful shock, so say our doctor, and in his delirium his ravings have been dreadful, of wolves and poison and bloods, of ghosts and demons, and I fear to say what. Be careful with him always, that it may be nothing to excite him of this kind for a long time to come. The traces of an illness of his do not lightly die away. We have written long ago, but we know nothing of his friends, and there was on him nothing to account any understanding. He came into the train in Klausenburg, and the guard was told by the station master that he was rushed into the station shouting for a ticket home. Seeing from his violent demeanor that he was English, they gave him a ticket to the furthest station on the way thither to the train reached. Be assured that he is well cared for. He has won all the hearts by his sweetness and gentleness. He is truly getting along well, and I have no doubt in a few weeks be himself again. But be careful of him for his safety's sake. There are, I pray God and St. John and St. Mary, many, many happy years for you both. Dr. Seward's Diary. 19th August. Strange and sudden turns in Renfield last night. About 8 o'clock he began to get excited and sniff about as a dog would sniff when sitting. The attendant was struck by his manner, and knowing my interest in him, encouraged him to talk. He is usually respectful to the attendant and at times servile, but tonight the man tells he was quite haughty. would not condescend to talking with him at all. All he would say was, "I don't want to talk to you. You don't count now. The master is at hand." The attendant thinks it's some form of religious mania which has seized him. If so, we must look for squalls. For a man with homicidal and religious mania at once may be dangerous. The combination is a dreadful one. At 9 o'clock I visited him myself. His attitude to me at the time was that of the attendant. In his sublime self-feeding, the difference between myself and the attendant seemed to him as nothing. It looks like religious mania, and he will soon think of himself that he is God. These infinitesimal distractions between man and man are too paltry for an omnipotent being. How these madmen give themselves away. The real God taketh heed lest a sparrow fall, and the God created from human vanity sees no difference between an eagle and a sparrow. Oh, if only men knew. For half an hour or more, Renfield kept getting excited in a greater and greater degree. I did not pretend to be watching him, but I kept strict observation at the same time. All at once, that shifty look came into his eyes, as he would always see when a madman has seized upon an idea, and with it the shifty movement of the head and the back which asylum attendants had come to know so well. He became so quiet, and went and sat on the edge of his bed resignedly, and looked into space with lackluster eyes. I thought I would find out if his apathy were real or simply assumed, and tried to lead him to talk of his pets, the theme in which he had never failed to excite his attention. At first he made no reply, but at length and testily he said, "Bother them all. I don't care a pin about them." "What?" I said. "You don't care? You don't mean to tell me that you don't care about spiders?" Spiders at present are his hobby, and the notebook is filling with columns of small figures. To this he answered enigmatically, "The bride maidens rejoice, the eyes that wait the coming of the bride, and when the bride draw neareth, then the maidens shine not to the eyes that are filled." He would not explain himself, but remained ostentatiously seated on the bed all the time I remained with him. I am weary tonight and low in spirits. I cannot think but of Lucy, and how things different might have been. If I don't sleep at once, Coriol, the modern Morpheus, C2HCHLO3 H2O, I must be careful not to let it grow into a habit. No, I shall take none tonight. I had thought of Lucy, and I shall not dishonor her by mixing the two. If need be, tonight shall be sleepless. Later, glad I made the resolution, glad that I kept it on it. I had lain tossed about, and heard the clock strike only twice, when the night watchman came to me, sent up from the ward to say that Renfield had escaped. I threw on my clothes and ran down at once. My patient is too dangerous a person to be roaming about. The idea of his might work out dangerously for strangers. The attendant was waiting for me. He said he had seen him not 10 minutes before, seemingly asleep in his bed, when he looked out through the observation trap of the door. His attention was called by the sound of the window being wrenched out. He ran back and saw his feet disappear through the window, and at once set up for me. He was only in his night gear and cannot be far off. The attendant thought it would be more useful to watch where he should go rather than to follow him, as we might lose sight of him whilst getting out of the building at the door. He is a bulky man and could not get through the window. I am thin, so with his aid I got out, but feet firstmost, and as we were only a few feet above the ground, landed unhurt. The attendant told me the patient had gone to the left and had taken a straight line, so I ran as quickly as I could. As I got through the belt of trees, I saw a white figure scale the high wall which separates our grounds from those of the deserted house. I ran back at once and told the watchman to get 3 or 4 men immediately and follow me into the grounds of Carfax, in case our friend might be dangerous. I got myself a ladder, and crossing the wall, dropped down on the other side. I could see Renfield's figure had just disappeared behind the angle of the house, so I ran after him. On the far side of the house, I found him pressed close against the old iron-bound oak door of the chapel. He was talking, apparently, to someone, but I was afraid to go near him as to hear what he was saying, lest I frightened him, and he should run off. Chasing an arid swarm of bees is nothing to following a naked lunatic. when the fit of escaping is upon him. After a few minutes, however, I could see that he did not take note of anything around him, so I ventured not to draw nearer. The more so as my men had now crossed the wall and were closing in, and I heard him say, "I am here to do your bidding, master. I am your servant, and you will reward me, for I shall be faithful. I have worshipped you long and from afar. Now that you are near, I await your commands, and you will not pass me by, will you, dear master, in your distribution of good things?" He is a selfish old beggar anyhow. He thinks of the loaves and the fish, even if he believes he is in a real presence. His manias have taken a strange, startling combination. When we closed in on him, he fought like a tiger. He was immensely strong, for he was more like a wild beast than a man. I never saw a lunatic with such a paroxysm of rage before, and I hope to never shall again. It is a mercy that we have found out that his strength and his danger in good time. With strength and determination like his, we could have done wild work before he was caged. He is now safe at any rate. Jack Shepherd himself could not get free of the strait waistcoat that keeps him restrained, and he is chained to the wall of the padded room. His cries are at times awful, but the silences that follow are more deadly still, for he means murder in every turn and movement. Just now he spoke coherently for the first time. "I shall be patient, master. It is coming. So I took the hint and came to. I was too excited to sleep, but this diary has quieted me, and I feel I shall get some sleep tonight after all.